There are 5 planning steps I run every single week in Notion, and I know if I skip them, my entire week feels off. I'll take you inside of my actual system and we'll go through these steps together exactly how I do them. The whole thing takes me less than 30 minutes, but it truly resets my mind, aligns me with my goals, and gives me a ton of clarity. And it's not about scheduling every single minute of your week. At least for me, that totally doesn't work. So if you want to make your weekly planning easier without the overwhelm, let's dive in.
Here we are in my Notion system, and this is the week that I'm having right now. Every single week in my system has a separate page, and if I scroll a little bit down, you can see that this is the structure of the template for every single week. On the left, we have a high-level summary for the week with all kinds of metrics and checkboxes. And on the right, we have two main sections that exist not only on weeks, but also on other cycles. And this is the clarity and planning section, the section that we're going to focus on today. And also at the end of the week, I do review and reflection. So this is the very beginning of the week. Actually, it's Tuesday now, so it's the 15th. And I was doing my planning on Monday, which is yesterday. While I was doing it, I kind of thought that would be great to share how I do my weekly planning process. So I scratched everything that I did, and I'm going to go through the same process that I did yesterday. Let's start with step number 1, and this is to schedule your already agreed upon commitments. So I'm talking about like meetings that you already agreed upon, or some events that you know you're going to be attending. And if we open my routines planning section right here, we're going to not only see my calendar, but also if you see the note here, it says schedule any agreed upon meetings, events, or commitments if you haven't already. Now, this is not something that happens in one batch where I schedule them. Usually when I come to this point of planning my week, I already have them scheduled. So if you look down here, so for example, I have my family dinner happening tomorrow. We have a team offline on Saturday. I'm not exactly sure about the time yet, but it's happening. I have a meeting with Alex, and I also, I'm going to be picking up my peptides package. Now, the exact specifics, of course, don't matter, but these things were coming up the week before, and as they were coming up, I were opening my Notion and scheduling them. So when Monday comes around, when I get to this section, usually they are already scheduled. But it's just an extra note here that in case I forgot to schedule some of them, and it happens sometimes, like I already have this meeting in my mind, but I just didn't input into my Notion. So this is the first step. Make sure that any commitments that you've already made and have in your calendar, you input them into your Notion. In this case, I go over my calendar. I know the things that I have planned for the week, so I just scan it. I remember that, yes, there is nothing else. I'm done. Moving on to step number 2, and this is to schedule your weekly routines. So I have a specific set of weekly routines, and you can see I have a button here that says weekly routines. So if we press that, it's actually a macro button that generates all the action items that I need to plan for the week. So this is very convenient for me. Now, quick caveat, I know I can auto schedule them, so you can obviously have them as a recurring task happening in Notion, but I do prefer this method of having a macro button that just generates them, because it just gives me a little more flexibility for when I can exactly schedule them. And at the same time, it takes me like 30 seconds to throw them into my calendar, but it just gives me more visibility, more control. So you can see these are my weekly routines. So I have my weekly life admin. That actually happens on Saturday. So I'm just going to drag it down there. And life admin stuff, it's basically your technicalities of life. Maybe you need to wash your car, do groceries, clean up your house, do laundry, whatever it is for you. Usually every person has some kind of life admin stuff. So I batch all my life admin stuff on Saturday. So that's where it goes. On Sunday, it's my weekly recovery and reset day. And also we do our weekly relationship meeting. And all the rest of the stuff, I do all of the rest of the stuff, like my weekly routine planning, which is what I'm doing right now, the digital reset and the review and all the rest of the routines, I do them on Monday. So let me just select all of these and drag them for the next week. So this is the next Monday, which is going to be the routines for the next week. So now I have all my weekly routines scheduled in my calendar. Also, I have two quick toggles here, one for birthdays and one for some optional routines that, I may or may not schedule. So they're not required. They're not something that happens every week, but I would just go through those toggles and see if I need to schedule anything else. In this case, in this week, I don't have any birthdays coming up and I'm not scheduling any extra routines. So in fact, we are done with the routines planning part. So you can see here on the left, I have check boxes for all this stuff. So when I'm done with planning my routines, I go here and I check routines planning as done. And I can toggle this one and we're moving on to the next step. You can see the next step is our brain reset. And I think this is very important. So you can immediately jump into setting focus for the week or trying to plan your projects. But I do really like having a few extra steps before I get to setting focus for the next week. And one important step is doing a brain reset. So the components for that is I do a review of my worry list. I picked this up from the book called, it's called Productivity Project. And I really like the concept. So usually in my life, I have a few things that I'm kind of worried about in the background of my mind. And of course, some of the things you can just like focus on them and resolve them, but sometimes that's not possible. So I have this worry list that I review every single week. This is just kind of my space and time to worry about things, and it helps me not to worry about them at other times. After I do that, my next sub-step would be to review my next actions. I have a toggle for all the next actions in the system that don't have a date set on them. These are not on my calendar. This is just something that I know I need to do, but I don't know when. In this case, I have a couple of things, but again, specifics don't matter. So this is all of them, and they have kind of GTD style context. So if it's an errand, or you can resolve that via phone or whatever. But I'll look at it, and maybe this is something I want to schedule for this week. Usually, unless I have a life admin day, I wouldn't be scheduling it inside of the work days. This could be something I would do on Saturday. In this case, I'm not going to be doing that. Like, it's not that important, and I know that I have my quarterly life admin reset coming up, so maybe this is something that would go there. Usually it takes me just like 20 seconds to look over that stuff, and maybe if I want to plan that, it would be, an extra 30 seconds. But moving on to probably the longest step of the brain reset, and this is just doing a brain dump. And you can see I have a longer note here, and it says that this is something you can do right below, so right underneath, like in this space here, or you can do it in a physical journal. So myself, in terms of doing a brain dump, I do that in a physical journal. That, to me, that makes a lot of sense, because then I can move something to Notion and something just stays on paper, and something is just completely irrelevant, but it was something I needed to dump out of my mind. So the point of this brain dump is just to clear everything out of your mind that has accumulated over the course of this cycle. Like, what is distracting you? What do you have that's constantly popping up into your head? Some open loops, some commitments that you made to other people, but maybe you know that you are not, either you haven't scheduled them or you're already behind. Just anything that's stressing you out, some small tasks, something that you're delaying, that needs to be done, but you're not doing. Or sometimes it can be like even large scale projects. So maybe it's something that's entirely non-work related, but maybe you just thought, man, I really want to get into like playing guitar. Like, I've been wanting to do that for a long time, and this thought just keeps popping up into your head. So maybe just write it down, write everything down, everything that comes to mind. And maybe this is something you can schedule specifically or something you can't. It doesn't matter. Just anything that's in your head, you should put that on paper. One tip I have for this specific exercise is to actually set a timer for that, because this is something you can take forever to do it. So if this is my kind of like a yearly brain reset, like I can take a day, like I don't care. But if it's a weekly reset that we're specifically talking about, I set a timer for 20 minutes, and when I'm done, I'm done. And the last thing I do with my brain reset is actually to process this entire brain dump. Now, as I said, some of this remains on paper, some of this can be moved into Notion. So, for example, if you came up with some kind of projects that you want to be creating, here's the projects tab. Like we talked about someday maybe projects. So if we go into my old projects, there is a tab that's called someday maybe. And like if you want to do your guitar lessons type of stuff, you can put it there. If you came up with a specific task that maybe you want to schedule, there is a calendar. If you came up with a task that you kind of know that needs to be done, but you don't know when that needs to be done, then you can just dump it into the next actions. So everything that can be processed from your brain dump, you can do it here. But as I said, even in this note right here, you don't have to process all the points in your brain dump right now. Like you can do that at the later planning stage, or maybe you can do it at a higher time frame, or maybe some of it just doesn't matter. This is completely fine. And that's actually it for the entire brain reset. Let's close these ones and we can go to the sidebar and hit brain reset checkbox. And let's move on to step number 4, which is reconnecting with your higher level vision. This is super important before you get into planning, because you have higher level time frames. You have your months, quarters, years, and every single cycle in my system has a focus. If we go to, let me just open cycles, and right here we have days, weeks, months, quarters, years, and I even go as far as creating chapters of life, which are periods of 3 to 5 years, seasons, which are intervals of 10 to 15 years, and lifetime. So these 3 are really about kind of vision for your life, and the rest are more about strategy and execution. But every single time frame has a focus. So if you're doing your planning for the month, obviously before doing that, you want to reconnect with your quarter. And if you're doing your planning for the year, you want to reconnect with your chapter of life and season of life and so forth. So in this case, in the reconnect section for the week, what we really want to be focusing on are the months and the quarters. So every single current cycle in my system is shown here. The purpose is to ensure that every single week builds towards your higher level cycles. In this case, I only briefly look over the seasons, chapters, and years, but I deeply review my months and quarters. So you can see that I have a focus for months, quarters, years, chapters, and seasons. Now, I'm not going to really talk about these ones in this case. They're really more about like super high level vision for your life. But when it comes to years, quarters, and months, like these are very tactical. So if I'm planning my week, I obviously want to really look into the focus for the month and the quarters. And this is also my opportunity to possibly update some of this information. So you can see the note here. You want to make sure that all the information is up to date and it still serves your current goals. And if something is not up to date, you can make any tweaks that you want. So for example, like 2 weeks in the month, I can see like maybe something has changed dramatically, that the monthly focus is no longer relevant. Maybe I need to add something else or replace something. Like this is my opportunity to do so. When I do my weekly reconnect, I don't touch my focus for the years or higher level timeframes. But in terms of adjusting the monthly focus, that's a place to do it. This usually takes literally just a couple of minutes, but it's super important. Just after doing this step, I'm already usually super clear on what it is I need to do next week. Of course, in order to be able to do that, you need to have all these cycles created in your system. But even if you have just months or quarters, at least have them and at least review your focus for those. And if you don't have them created in Notion, maybe you have them written down somewhere. I mean, it's less optimal, but at least have that as a checkbox in your weekly review so you can actually go find your goals for the year or whatever you have and review them really quickly. Take a minute. This is a very high ROI thing that you can do when planning your week. So let's toggle this one and let's go to the sidebar and check our Reconnect box. And we are moving on to the final step, step number 5, and that is to reset your projects and actually set focus for the upcoming week. So let's toggle this one, and this is where this is happening. And just to quickly first show you like what it is that we're trying to achieve. You probably saw this in our Reconnect section, but every single cycle has a focus, which is usually from 1 to 5 main points that you need to be focusing on during the cycle. Obviously, the higher level the time frame, the more abstract the focus is, and the lower the time frame, the more direct and action oriented the focus is. So in case of weeks, like this is very, very specific focus. And I'm interested in 1 to 3 most important things that I can do this week to really move forward my higher level aspirations and projects. And in terms of projects, I have some of the higher level projects already rolling up into my week. So these are monthly projects, but I can also add some weekly projects. In fact, let me show you how this looks. So if we go to our active and next up project stack, you can see they're broken down by time frame. So we have yearly and higher projects, we have quarterly projects, monthly projects, and weekly projects. So this is how I handle projects in my system, because projects can be very different. A project is just a collection of action items. It's something that you can't just accomplish with 1 day worth of work. But obviously, something that you can accomplish in just a week can be very different from your project that spans years. So in my system, those can be nested. So you can have a yearly project that consists of several quarterly projects, or a quarterly project that consists of several monthly projects, etc. And when it comes to monthly projects, they can be broken down into weekly projects, but sometimes that's not necessary. So in this case, for example, I have a project, Streamline YouTube Video Production. Like, I don't need to be breaking it down into sub projects. Like, this is enough for me. So if I scroll down, you can see that it's already rolling up into my weekly focus. So this project is attached to the month of July, so I can already see that. If I add a different weekly project, it will override basically the focus of these projects. But in this case, actually, I don't have any specific weekly project that I'm going to be working on this week, because the only weekly project that I have is to build my core Notion system templates, and it's coming up because I will be doing that after I do this one. So in this case, I'm not going to have any weekly projects, and these are the projects that are going to be in focus for this week. So this is how projects work in the system. And if we read this node, first thing we do is actually we just go over the projects that are active currently, and we update their statuses, update the progresses, etc. So in this case, for example, maybe I was done with some of these projects and I wanted to start working on this one. So I would update status to active. But in this case, that's not true. I'm not yet beginning to work on this one, so I'm continuing to work on these projects here. Some of the projects you can see they're in blocked status, etc. Some of these are very different. So this one, for example, is unrelated to work at all. So you can have personal projects as well. I created this one because usually I do rock climbing, but I've recently injured my finger. So I'm going to be doing a kind of a dedicated challenge for weightlifting because I haven't done that for a long time. So I created a project for that. So if you look at our node here, there are a few things that we need to make sure. First of all, if we have very high level projects like yearly or quarterly, and they're not broken down into smaller projects, that's probably something that we need to work on. That's one. Two, we need to make sure that there is a clear next step, like next action step for every active project. So if we have like 2 active projects right now, okay, like what is the specific next step for every project? It may or may not be like an action that's scheduled into your calendar, but at least you need to know what is the next step. And of course, if you need to create any new projects, that's obviously also a place where you can do that. And if not, that's okay. So in this case, we're not going to be creating any new projects. Let's scroll down now, and we know we're not going to have any specific weekly project that's going to be overriding this one. So we're still focusing on these two projects here. The only thing left is to write our 1 to 3 most important points that we are going to be focusing on this week. And by this time, 99% of the time, I'm already super clear on these 1 to 3 points. So I have my calendar with all the stuff that I already have scheduled. I have my higher level focus for the month, and I have my active projects. And if you have 1 or 2 projects that you're actively working on and you've already made sure that you know what's the next step for all of these projects, setting a focus for the week is just a piece of cake. So in this case, I know I have these 2 projects that I'm working on. So obviously I'm gonna make sure I release new YouTube video. So this is gonna be my focus number 1. 2, I have a very important team meeting this week. That's about, you can see this one, team offline, but actually the point of that meeting is because we're going to be launching a new marketing campaign for my rock climbing gym. So team meeting about new gym campaign. So this is 2. And 3, we have another project that I'm working on, and I already have a weightlifting program set up. And along with my weightlifting challenge, I'm also going to be taking some peptides to try to help me out with that. It's, again, not super important, the specifics, but I'm going to start my peptides cycle. So that's it. There's no need to overthink it. If I just do these 3 things, I'm going to be super happy with my week. And this is kind of how I think about it. Like when I'm planning my next week, like what are the 1 to 3 things that if I accomplish them, I think that would be a great week. And that's all you need. So now let's go up. Let's toggle this one. And we can also go here to the sidebar and toggle these 2 checkboxes, and we're completely done with our clarity and planning. And you can also see that our focus for the week appeared here. So now anywhere else in the system where I reference my week, I'm going to immediately see the focus for the week. So of course, every time I'm planning my days, I'm going to be also seeing my focus for the week, which is super important because just as we were aligning our weekly focus with our monthly focus, we're going to be now aligning every daily focus with our weekly focus. And that's all you need to do. I prefer my calendar to stay relatively empty. I don't need to be planning out every single thing. I have a focus for the week. I have the top 3 things I need to do. I have scheduled my routines. I've scheduled my meetings and commitments. That's all. I don't think you need to overbook your calendar. The week isn't that long. If you have the top 3 things that you want to do, your routines, your meetings scheduled, you're golden. I think just following this 5-step planning system every single week, you'll maintain a crazy level of mental clarity at all times. And also you're going to stay sane and not overwhelmed. So that's it for this one. And if you want a clear step-by-step tutorial on how to start building such a system, you can watch this video here.